Hello, and welcome to Grimming It Up. I'm Grandmama Christine, and here we tell stories about the strange, unusual, and sometimes true crime. But today, I'm going to tell you about the dead man's hand. Is the dead man's hand a superstition, an omen, or just another urban legend? It sounds so ominous, almost like a ghost story, begging to be told. The dead man's hand. Is it based on actual events? What is the origin and the history of the dead man's hand? It's related to the Wild West and poker, but why? Has anyone killed someone or been killed after playing it? What cards make up the dead man's hand? And lastly, what are some of the pop culture references to the dead man's hand? See, I'm full of questions, and hopefully, I've snagged a few for you as well. If you do even the most basic of searches on the internet for the dead man's hand, you will first find that it's a superstition or omen relating to poker. Second, James Butler's Wild Bill Hickok's death story seems to be tied to it. And after finding this for myself, a few new questions arose. Why Wild Bill? Did the dead man's hand have a history before Wild Bill? I don't know. Let's see what we can find out with this one. The dead man's hand before Wild Bill's death. It did have a history before. It turns out the dead man's hand had a life before Wild Bill. Well, sort of anyway. Before we get into that part, let's settle on what style of poker it's most commonly associated with. And that would be 5-card stud. But there are also some variations of the hand related to 5-card draw, 7-card draw, and 7-card stud. Clear as mud, right? Yeah, I thought so too. Next, trying to answer questions about the dead man's hand before Wild Bill would depend on geographic locations in the United States. It seems there wasn't a standard either, as in some places, specific suits in a full house, or a 3 of a kind, or 2 pairs, were all said to be a dead man's hand. For example, here's a few of them. A full house with 3 tens and a pair of jacks. Or a full house with 3 nines and a pair of jacks. Or a full house with 3 aces and a pair of eights. Then we move into some of the other hands, like a 3 of a kind with 9s. 2 pairs of queens and 8s. Or 2 pairs of jacks and 8s. 2 pairs of jacks and 7s. 2 pairs of 10s and 3s. So, yeah, before Wild Bill, clearly there wasn't a standard. It made it so difficult trying to sort through some of this, and I'm not a poker aficionado, so any of you who are, maybe you can help out with better direction or some other sites I can look into. Because, yeah, I was kind of drawn at straws towards the end of that one. I was like, wow, this is amazing. But anyway, from Wild Bill's death to Wilcox's book. Try as I might, I couldn't find documentation of what locations were associated with each of those specific combinations. This is where you grim folk come in. You might have more info on the regions in the United States in your area, and if so, please do share in the comments or on our socials. This could be very entertaining for all of us to try and figure out which combinations went with which parts of the country. There was a man who tried to nail this down, but it looks like he pulled together some hands from newspapers and a couple of books, and that was Cecil Adams. He shared his research from the column The Straight Dope, and here are some of his findings. A full house with 3 tens and a pair of jacks from Grand Forks, Daily Herald, 1886. A full house with 3 jacks and a pair of 8s from Eau Claire, Leader, in 1898. A full house with 10s and 8s from Trenton Times, 1900. Or a full house of jacks and 7s from the Encyclopedia of Superstitions and Folklore and Occult Sciences in 1903. A full house of jacks and 8s from Hoyle's Games in 1907. Yeah, he found these articles, but as far as what states most of these are from, I don't know. I'm not the newspaper wizard either, so, again, Grimfolk, help out if you can. Will Satch's book ties Deadman's hand to aces and 8s. Who is Will Satch? How does his book fit into the lore of the Deadman's Hand? Well, he was an author named Frank G. Wilstach, and he wrote Wild Bill Hickok's biography in 1926. I believe he defines what cards make up the quote-unquote official Deadman's Hand today, plus or minus on the kicker card. You'll see. As far as I can tell, it was after he published his book that we now associate black aces and 8s with the Deadman's Hand. Wilstach had been in correspondence with Ellis T. Doc Pierce, who was the barber in Deadwood, Dakota Territory. Doc had prepared Wild Bill's body for burial. Through their discussions, Wilstach was able to piece together what brought about Wild Bill's death. It's story time, y'all. But this is Wild West, and that means the stories are larger than life, and more often than not, provable facts are scarce. I'm going to simplify the story of Wild Bill's death, as there is a lot of back and forth about everything and every aspect of the story. Seriously. Y'all think I'm joking? Was Wild Bill's hand still clenched when the Undertaker prepared him? Did Wild Bill argue with the shooter? Was the shooting an act of revenge? What were the actual cards Wild Bill was holding? The list goes on and on. Picture an old western Main Street. Wooden buildings, some single story, some multi-story, and with a dirt road parting them, maybe a tumbleweeds rolling down the middle. Then we pan into a saloon, complete with wooden, slatted swinging doors. Peer inside, and off to one side you see a card table, and a long bar against the far wall, and a few other tables on the other side of the room. There are men scattered throughout, some sitting alone, some in groups. Maybe the table closest to the door is empty. We're going to focus on the card table in the back. The men fill all the seats. One man stands up and leaves the table sulking. In walks a cowboy with a wide-brimmed hat, his long dark hair flowing over his shoulders. His face stern, with his long mustache and whips. This man scans the room, and then he struts up to the recently vacated chair at the table. He sets his hand on its back, hoping one of the other players will want it so he can have his back to a wall. No luck. He sits down anyway, with his back towards the swinging doors, and joins the other poker players in 5-card stud poker. The players at the table take turns, betting and revealing their cards for a few rounds. The poker players watch one another for signs or tells, hoping to know when to fold or when to save their chips. Perhaps an eye twitch showing the others a good hand. Maybe a casual finger tap on the top of the cards, in other hopes he might get a better card in the next round. These men are gamblers. They each want to walk away a winner, with more money than they had when they started. Smoke is wafting in the air. This is Middleman's Saloon, number 10. A young drunken man named Jack McCall staggers through the swinging doors. He stumbles over to the poker table and takes a recently vacated seat. Jack pulls out the chair and falls into the seat unceremoniously, I might add. He then asks to be dealt in on the next round. The young man scans the other players. Wild Bill with his back to the door, Charles Rich, William Massey, and Carl Mann, and the dealer. It's now a full table again. Jack is feeling lucky. He plays his hand and bets everything he has on a game. As the other players reveal their hands, it becomes clear that Jack has lost it all. Frustrated and upset, he stands up to leave. Wild Bill offers him a coin or two, so Jack can at least buy breakfast. Jack refuses and stumbles out of the saloon offended. The young men who are left at the table shrug at one another after the sore, drunk loser's departure. They continue playing as the night goes on. After some time, though, the poker players are focused on their game, and Jack stumbles back into the saloon. He makes his way to the bar and orders a drink. He turns towards the poker table and pulls out his Colt .45 caliber revolver, shouting, "Damn you, take that!" and he fires a shot. Struck with a bullet in the back of his head, Wild Bill falls forward. The other men at the poker table all jump up out of their seats and scramble for cover. The town soon captures Jack McCall after he flees the saloon. In the first trial, Jack is found innocent by the local miners' jury, since he claims the shooting was retribution for Wild Bill Hickok's killing McCall's brother. But our boy Jack, he starts running his mouth and boasting about killing Wild Bill. This gets folks in Deadwood talking, and it turns out to be very bad for Jack McCall. And this time, he's found guilty of murdering Wild Bill. Jack's sentence is death by public hanging. On March 1st, 1877, Jack McCall is executed by hanging him until his death. 6 months have passed since he killed Wild Bill Hickok. So is this the birth of the Deadman's hand? Doc the Barber would tell anyone who asked him that he pried the cards from Wild Bill's hand, and that the cards were aces and eights with a queen as a kicker. In other versions, Neil Christie collected the cards and passed them to his son. No matter who actually retrieved the card, Frank Wilstoch's book took this moment as the birth of the modern version of Deadman's Hand. The modern version is black aces and eights with a queen of hearts. In Wilstoch's book, the queen had a blood droplet on it from Wild Bill's murder. Now, is it a superstition or an omen? It is a good or bad? These are the questions we seek to answer. We try to, anyway. I don't have a definitive answer as to whether it's an omen or a superstition, or if it's good or bad. Just like with Wild Bill's death story, it truly depends on whom you ask and what sources you review. Here are a few versions I found interesting. Aces and eights, the Deadman's hand can't be beat. I feel safe in saying this one was good luck. If you looked good in a suit, then you looked aces and eights. The fastest horses at a racetrack could also be called aces and eights. So I think all of those are versions of the good. Now let's look at some of the bad luck side. Poker player superstition says the hand is an omen of death like Wild Bill. Now, I don't know about you, but I was definitely asking, has anyone actually died after playing the Deadman's Hand other than Wild Bill? Well, it actually appears only Wild Bill Hickok has this distinction. But I found a couple of other poker player stories about their deaths at the table or shortly thereafter that you might find interesting. Here's a couple of them. Jack Strauss was quite a poker legend. He was an amazing comeback story one year, and in another game, he pulled off a major bluff. His comeback story goes that about midway through the poker tournament, he went all in with his chips, but he didn't declare it. This turned out to be a wonderful thing. Since he had missed a single $25 chip, he ended up losing that hand, and with his remaining chip keeping him in the tournament, he ended up winning the whole tournament, y'all. I'd say that was lucky. That's a heck of a comeback. His bluff, much like his comeback, is pretty cool too. He had a losing hand with 7 cards. Jack had a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, but his last card was no straight. He kept that to himself, though. And in true Jack style, he built up the drama by turning over a single card at a time. With each new card, the players folded and forfeited their bets. In the end, the incomplete straight, he won the entire pot for that game. Sadly, Jack died of a ruptured aneurysm while he was playing poker when he was 58. Lastly, we have Tom Abdu, who had a heart attack while he was playing poker in 1967. Emergency services quickly put him under treatment. While Tom was being taken from the table, he asked another card player to count his chips and save his seat. Get this, y'all. He had this conversation while he was in cardiac arrest. This proved to be fatal for Tom, though. His dedication to the game resulted in his induction to the Poker Hall of Fame. I'd say that's dedication. You're in the middle of a cardiac arrest and you're like, hold my cards and my chips. Like, somehow he's gonna mysteriously come back. Maybe he did come back as a ghost player. I'll have to look into that a little bit more. Now on to some of what I think of as more of the fun relation of the Deadman's Hand is some of the pop culture references. Because this is where I've heard of it. And what got me curious as to what exactly it was. If you're into Western movies or TV, you have likely heard the phrase Deadman's Hand. I figured out this part, but be careful what you will find doing this. Turns out, sci-fi, cop dramas, and even a few comedies have also used this phrase. There were way too many to be listed here. One movie is John Ford's 1939 Western Stagecoach, which John Wayne killed the character holding the aces and eights. It's a kind of fun one to look back on. And in books, the Deadman's Hand is also featured in books like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I didn't see that one coming. It was published by Ken Kesey in 1962. A character, R.P. McMurphy, has a couple of tattoos. One of the poker cards fanned out over his chest shows aces and eights. Some of the stories with Deadman's Hand in the title are from George R.R. Martin. This is a collection of Wild West stories. And John Joseph Adams has a collection of horror stories that center on the theme of gambling. And John Meany's novel is a supernatural thriller that follows a woman who receives a mysterious deck of cards that seems to be tied to a string of murders. That one kind of sounds like I should probably check it out. Lastly, another book with this title is Tim Curran's horror novel, and it's about a group of friends who venture into an abandoned casino and find themselves trapped there by a malevolent force. Some of these really sound like they're right up my alley. I think I might have to add them to my reading list. Now, musical pop culture references. In songs, there's a whole lot of this phrase being referenced by Bob Dylan. Will O'Connelly's character in the song Ramblin' Gambling Willie. Both Lord Huron and the Moonshine Bandits have songs titled Deadman's Hand. Even Five Finger Death Punch and Black Veil Brides do too. Oddly enough, I made a playlist to listen to while I was researching and writing this up that had some of these on it on YouTube. I guess I can share that with y'all. If you go over to our YouTube channel, I'll have that one publicly available, and you can check out some of the songs. I don't know about you. I have a tendency to rather enjoy Five Finger Death Punch, and I even really like the Moonshine Bandits version of the song. I don't know. I don't even know what their style of music is called. But you can check it out. Now, what I didn't expect when I was looking at pop culture references is law enforcement. Yeah, you heard me, y'all. Law enforcement. The last pop culture reference I'm going to leave y'all with is the police. Not kidding either. The Deadwood Police Department uses aces and eights as a patch on their uniforms. And if we're being honest, I think this one is expected-ish, but the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department Homicide Division and the Los Angeles Police Department Crash Squad, along with the Armed Forces Medical Examiner System, all use some of the aces and eights in their patches on their uniforms too. Yes, it's quite popular. Maybe Vegas for the gambling aspect? I don't know. And yes, the town of Deadwood, South Dakota also does reenactments and ghost tours too. If anyone has been to any of these, please let the rest of us know what it was like. It might help some of the other grandfolk who will be visiting Deadwood to add this to their fun list. I hope it's cool. Some of the ghost walks I have done, I've really enjoyed, so maybe this would be fun to check out sometime. This just about wraps up today's episode. I would love to hear your thoughts, or if you've had any experience with perhaps visiting Deadwood, South Dakota, or something like that. Also, if you'd like to share any additional information I might not have covered, you can do that in a lot of different ways, such as on our socials on Facebook, Instagram, or X. Though, I must warn you, I'm the most active on Facebook. Additionally, you can leave a comment on our blog post or website at grimmingitup.org. Perhaps you'd rather leave a voice recording, and there's a couple ways to do that on our Spotify account for one, or you can record it on your phone and email it to grimmingitup@gmail.com. I would also like to thank my blog editor, Donna Marie West. She has been wonderful to work with, and if any of you might be interested in her services, she can be reached on Facebook as Donna Marie West. Easy to find, Canadian, super sweet. I highly recommend her. And if you like what we're doing, I could really use your help in spreading the word and inviting others to join us. Lastly, I would like to thank you for spending time with me today, and I hope to have you back again soon. Till then, stay weird and stay spooky. Bye now.